queers who forget about struggling to adult, we're struggling to human.
At least that's what everyone's telling us.
You're right.
Per usual. Hey, I'm Angela, bringing sense to the conversation. From here on my soapbox, I shed light on the things society doesn't want you to talk about. You know, the real shit that matters, intersectional thinking, sexuality, queerness, neurodiversity, consent, and the fact that self-care is bullshit. For me, it's all about community and how we can care for each other.
And I'm Molly, giving a big fork you to cookie cutter solutions. I help burnt out, busy as fuck, neurodivergent, and queer entrepreneurs make shit happen by providing out of the box solutions and sustainable systems to grow your biz. For me, it's all about doing what makes sense for your brain.
Enough with the chit chat. Let's get to it.
Keep listening, and together we'll explore the drudgery, dreams, and all that shit in between. Get ready to call bullshit on what everyone's saying you should be doing,
as we navigate the spectrum between what really matters to you and the shit keeping you from it.
Good morning, everybody.
Hello.
I'm glad to be here today, turning my phone on silent so it doesn't ring again. Today's conversation is all about functioning labels and bullshit words people like to use for the autistic community and neurodivergent community in general. My cat evidently is joining us for this episode. Okay, ma'am. Oh my god. Okay, and now my camera went all wonky. Anyway, so we're having a podcast episode, ma'am. Okay. Now I can't get my
but heavy anyway. Kitty on the lap and purr to make you feel better because it's been a morning.
As Blaine calls it, it's been a struggle bus day. But I can't focus because my camera is not focused. I'm closing my eyes and going to talk. So the other day, I'll give you some backstory as to like how we came to this subject. I mean, we've talked about it all the time, but why we decided today was the day. I was reading an article, and I don't remember where I found it. I'm gonna assume it was Google News, and it was talking about how we shouldn't use, and I'm going to use a phrase we don't use anymore, Asperger's, and why we don't use it. And then it started talking about level supports and blah, 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 and functioning labels, blah, blah, blah. And I messaged Angela and I just sent the news article link, and she was like, why the hell did you send this to me? Like, what's the purpose of you sending me this link? And I was like, I'm mad. And I was like, I'm just mad because honestly, it doesn't matter which way you slice it. It literally is the same thing. Level 1, level 2, level 3, high functioning, low functioning, differentiating between autism and Asperger's, which we don't do, obviously, but
words.
It's words. And repackaging it in a different fucking package with a different fucking bow.
So here's what's really funny, Molly, because you just used the term struggle bus, which is another argument within the community where we have some people saying, don't use that term because it's in relation to the short bus, which is in relation to special needs, and special needs is not the appropriate way to have discussions about learning disabilities and needing that support because everybody has needs, and this is all valid. But on the other side, there are people who are saying absolutely not. Struggle bus doesn't have anything to do with that. You're wrong. And this is actually saying, when somebody says the struggle bus is real, it doesn't have anything to do with, and people argue kind of about the etymology of where that came from. So words are a big ass deal. And it takes a lot of energy from a lot of people in and out of our community because we think so much about words. I'm not saying that's bad. It's just that's what we're talking about today.
It is. Honestly, to anybody I offended by saying struggle bus, I'm sorry, but honestly, I thought I made that phrase up for a while from something independent. I just, like, was talking to my kid, and I was just like, "Oh, are you on the struggle bus?" Because that made sense in terms of nothing to do with that. Okay, anyway, moving on. Um, uh, yes, so and I can get on a tangent about words. I've gotten on a tangent about the word "just" 40 million times with Angela because, um, I
Because
struggle with words as it is.
you were told, don't use
Yes.
just.
I was. I was told, "You're deflecting when you say just. Don't say, 'Oh, don't' that's, something about feminine." I don't even remember because it was such bullshit. Um, it was something about, like,
Yeah,
women
you're
speak in a specific
minimizing.
you're minimizing your wants. No, I'm utilizing all the words in the fucking English dictionary to use them in a very specific way to get my point across, because if I was like, "I did that," did you do that last week? Did you do that last year? But if I said, "I just did that," then you literally did it like 3 minutes ago. But if I don't use just, how would you know that? I recently did that doesn't have the same effect. But if you're trying to be like, "Don't do it again, I just did that," the only way to do that is with the word just. Anyway, I digress. So, Angela had found I'm gonna dig into this because it's honestly the perfect
Yeah, absolutely. We like this site, right? We like Embrace Autism. The website that has lots of assessments and things on there that people can use self-assessments, and it has discussions, and it is embrace-autism.com. And we will obviously drop this specific link in there for you, but we like this site,
Mhm.
um, for the resources that it has on it. And this is probably my favorite out of the 500 million things. Okay, there aren't actually 500 million, right? We know this.
No.
Out of the many, many, many articles that you can find out there talking about the DSM 5 and the levels of autism, level 1, level 2, level 3, this one is by far my favorite, um, because
'Cause it's
it
an
is
8-bit.
it is gamified. So here is what they say. I love this so much. The DSM-5 presents three categories of autism based on the extent of required support, referred to as levels. Because we are talking about levels, what comes to mind are games. Let's play a video game called DSM-5. And then it gets into levels 1, 2, and 3, which levels 1, 2, and 3 have replaced high functioning, medium functioning, and low functioning.
1, 2, and 3 is still the same damn thing.
It's the same thing.
It's the same thing.
The same thing.
They like, I mean, it is cute how they presented it, don't get me wrong, and it's not their fault that they're presenting it, they're just
Right, they're
presenting
just
what the
presenting it.
DSM-5 is doing. Um, and
Yep.
so I am not putting any specific level of autism on a pedestal, for the sake of this conversation, or any person who has autism over another person who is autistic. Um, and so here's my thing. In what situation would you be applying these levels? Because technically, depending on the environment the individual is in, it would be different.
Right. Which is a point. So here's another thing that it says on this page. Um, It should be noted, however, that particularly when associations with video games come up, these quote unquote levels may be interpreted as different levels of difficulty within living life and consequent levels of required support. But even those diagnosed as ASD level 1, formerly Asperger's syndrome, high functioning autism, and PDD-NOS may require substantial support at times in their lives. I know I have.
Yes.
And it continues to say, moreover, the three levels probably have little bearing on the quality of life of autistic people. For example, someone who requires substantial support could very well live a happier life if their needs are met, whereas a so called quote unquote high functioning autistic may be thrown in the deep end, functioning enough to possibly even escape diagnosis, but not well enough equipped to deal with life and lacking societal support. And that's why we're having this conversation today.
Yes. And this is definitely why we're here. So, uh, and at both ends of like the scenario spectrum here, like we have the people in the middle, or the people in the middle in this specific scenario. I'm sorry. Um, we have people who are slapped with a low functioning label or level 3, um, probably as kids because they're so
Because they're nonverbal.
because they're not
That
verbal.
way,
Yeah,
if you're nonverbal, you're slapped with a high support needs label.
right. And in some cases, and I'm saying this from conversations I've had recently with adults who are new to navigating environments with autistic folks, and they'll be like, "Oh, well, they're nonverbal. Like, what matters what
Right.
they care? Like, they don't. It
And
doesn't
they're
matter what they think."
most are not nonverbal, most are non-speaking.
Right.
But the literature uses the term nonverbal, and that's another thing that is trying to be
Yes.
changed because words.
Yes. But my point here is there's an assumption by people who honestly don't know anything, um, that there's an intelligence factor with a nonverbal or non-speaking factor, which is utter bullshit. There's this, well, we need to make them communicate. So we're going to take away all of the accommodations,
We need to
and
make them
then
communicate like we want them to
like we
communicate
want them to communicate.
because
And
they're
like
communicating.
they
When I
are,
go non-speaking, I'm still communicating.
right. And so I feel like that's not good. Like slapping somebody with a high support uh level 3, whatever you want to call it or slice it, it's all the same damn piece of pizza. um I feel like it puts them in a box where people who aren't familiar just assume things about them that aren't true. Equally as detrimental, people who are slapped with high functioning level 1 low support scenarios are not receiving any support.
Often are
You're
not receiving
functioning,
diagnosis.
right? You're functioning enough. You can handle it. Figure it out. Like, so we have these two sides that are equally terrible, um, in the sense of the assumptions that are made about them. I mean, like, um, and
And that's the issue is the
it's just
assumptions,
the issue.
right?
Yes.
Is it's everything, and we say this, I think we say this nearly every episode.
Yeah.
Everything is context dependent. And there are many folks out there, regardless of the neurodivergency that they have. There are
Mhm.
many folks out there who in certain scenarios, and let's face it, neurotypicals as well. Depending on the context, people need support in different areas at different
Oh, yeah.
times based on all of the different things happening. You know, I had different support needs when I had cancer. I had
Right.
different support needs when I was a single mom. Um, I have different support needs after a big um, event like I had last week.
True. I had a thought and it left. I'm not trying to be silent on purpose. Well, okay. So, and you mentioned like, I think a lot of it has to do with also, so I'll give an example. this week I was talking to somebody about their child, and they were like, well, my child's not neurodivergent. She just is anxious, which is code for your child's not anxious. Something else is going on. And I was like, well, that's kind of like saying your baby has colic. Like, let's slap a blanket analysis on there and just call it good. Um, and more I'm seeing friends whose kids were diagnosed with anxiety, like chronic anxiety, situational anxiety. They're being diagnosed as autistic. And it's me saying, there's more to that. Go and investigate. Does your child also do XYZ? And they find out, yeah, their kiddo is autistic. But then they're like, well, now what? Now what? Because in like, especially for the parent friends that are neurotypical, they've never had to think about how to support any of this or even thought about how there could be anything different, like how to clean up your room, like how to, you know, ask for what you need at a restaurant, how to talk when people of all of these different areas are coming and trying to talk to you at the same time. Like those parents have never had to think about that. And now they're trying to figure out supports. And I feel like it would be much better. And I'm talking from like a parental child situation, but I think it's applicable if there was like a partner to another partner. When, we get these autism diagnoses, can't talk, or ADHD or whatever, and it's like your kid, instead of saying your kid is at this level, because we're making a broad assumption off of 3 hours in a room, like whatever, your child might struggle or your partner might struggle with these things. And then there can be conversations or looking out for different things. And then it's assessing the supports that are needed to that individual instead of assuming, oh, they're level 1, so they're not going to need any support in this area.
Mhm.
Or they're level 3, they're going to need all these supports. But do they? We're
Right.
assuming that based off of other people,
Yeah.
not that individual. And so I guess that's where I'm kind to get as far as like solutions based because I don't think it's fair for anybody. Like it's great to have a group of people who understand because similar things are happening to them, but when it comes to real life scenario living your life things, it's not fair to judge what you do off of your neighbor or your friend. And I don't think it's fair that clinicians, providers that's what they're doing. Not all of them, obviously. There's good peeps around, but yeah. Anyway,
Right, but
I
even
went on a
even good
tangent.
peeps are the DSM-5 says if we're going to do a diagnosis, and that diagnosis is going to be something where people can receive support, um, and the support that they receive is going to be based on this diagnosis. So going back to the game,
Mm-hmm.
um, so here's the thing. Okay, gamified, right? Um, level difficulty is easy peasy. This is level 1. Okay, first of all, easy peasy. Um, it says doesn't know what the game is about is equivalent of challenges with social communication, which is what the DSM-5 says. And then another one on there, difficulty approaching enemies, which is difficulty initiating social interactions. Um, anyway, it goes on to say that. And then so each level has different things. For example, medium level, obvious social impairments even with support. This would be level difficulty medium, can't play without walkthroughs. And then we go down to level 3, which says plays slowly, which is equivalent to uses few words of intelligible speech. What if this person plays slowly? They can't play without walkthroughs, and they have difficulty approaching enemies. That's 3 different levels. So are we going to dictate you are level X? And that's really what happens, right? I sit down and I play a video game with my son, and I am doing those 3 things, and he's like, ah, you're a low level player, and I'm gonna set the game at X level, the lowest level, and now I'm bored because I don't need that level of the game that he perceives I need because he is at a different level. And that's really what these levels do for us, in reality is we've got this neurotypical person over here who sees us maybe specifically at work, and we are very competent at getting our job done. And because we function well in that capitalist space that says you do a good job, therefore you're not disabled, which those two things should not be side by side, right? And what they don't know is I have expended every little bit of energy that I did to perform in that situation that helps me pay the bills, and all of my relationships suffer because
Poop. Um, there she's back. Uh, welcome back. We both
yeah,
got
where did we
kicked out.
leave? Yeah, that was
Uh,
great. Where did we
you
get kicked out?
said suffer, and then that's where I
Okay,
left.
yes. So all of my relationships suffer, right? And so a lot of people who are get that label of level 1, well, their level 1 needs in these activities that they're doing. And then they are level 3 needs at these other activities because now they've expended all of their energy in order to be in that level 1 category. Now, with saying that, it is easy for those of us who are able to have that energy to expend it to be viewed as label 1, to speak for an entire community of people and say, don't label me. Sometimes the labels can be helpful.
Mm-hmm.
And what needs to happen is we need to be able to look at each individual and listen to that individual and hear what they say, however they say it, and let them decide what their support needs are in any given situation. And have that understanding that those needs change based on the environment and the situation.
Mm-hmm.
That's what's missing.
Yeah. It's more like, I guess I see it like gatekeeping as well, both ways. I feel like people who are incorrectly getting put, like specifically in the category 2, I feel like there's a lot of gatekeeping there because I feel
The
like
bubble
some of those,
category.
yeah, I feel like some people might need more support, but oh, well, you're only at level 2. You don't get to that next thing to get that extra support. And I feel like, or conversely, you're getting categories in a 1 and you're supposed to be like, reality is you're supposed to be more at a 2. Like, I just feel like it's an insurance gatekeeping situation. Which I mean, it probably is. Um,
Sometimes it is.
and
You know.
and I think that's the part that bugs me the most. Instead of being like, okay, as a person who is autistic, you qualify for all of these things and you can use what you need. Because that'd be fair. Like here's all the things for
Mhm.
all people, and you get to use what you need and have access to those things. Now I realize that there are shortages of humans who can do all the things that provide all these services. I get that. But like I'm talking about if we were actually able to support people in an optimal way, it should just be, oh, you're autistic, shop support. Like, you know,
Right. So,
um,
we don't have that here in the US. However, in Australia,
mhm,
they have NDIS, which is a, disability insurance scheme. If I remember right, that's what it stands for. And I know the term
American
scheme, we
English
look
and scheme.
I know we hear that
American
and we're like,
English.
scheme, what are they doing? But actually it doesn't mean anything bad. They have this
Hmm.
support system in place that has some different levels on what you need. So some people, it's completely self-determined, and they say, okay, and they make all the choices. They pay the bills. They spend the time, effort, and energy doing that, including saying, I need somebody to come in and help me pay the bills. And so I'm going to set that up. They have that. And then there's the another level where you get some support with who is paying it, who it has to filter through. And then there's the third tier, which is it's always filtering through, um, to make these decisions. Um, so they really look at self determination, to pick like which one of those levels is best for you, and how are you going to do that, and then you get to decide what supports you need, and you say, you know what, I need this support. And and so that is in place. But then again, there is that, do they decide how do they decide how much money you have to spend a year for these supports? Do you get $35,000 a year? What's that based on? Right?
Mhm.
Like, and when they are based on things like a blanket label, that can become detrimental.
True.
But
There's
that's an
never
exciting
gonna be a
system. Like,
right
I
answer.
enjoy no, I really enjoy, looking at that system, and, it's important for us to be able to look and see what others are doing that is effective. Um, I was talking to somebody the other day, and they're like, "You push so hard to get things done because you don't have any supports in place if you don't get them done."
Right.
And that's because they have social insurance, and they don't have to think about these things.
Mhm.
So when they understood, like, you don't understand, I have to get this done, and it has to be done by such and such date, because after that date, I'm no longer going to have health insurance, and I'm going to have to come up with $1,000 a month to pay health insurance. Um, People who have never experienced that, they don't necessarily understand. So these labels, they make a difference to them in a different way than they make a difference to us.
Mhm. That's true. Yeah, and England or the UK has a similar system as well. Um, I, I it's a lot more bureaucratic, but like it's
Yeah, they don't have
definitely
they don't have a system like NDIS, and there are a lot of
no.
issues in the UK. In the whole neurodiversity conversation. There's like, talking to people from the UK, there's a lot of infighting, And there's a lot of things happening in the neurodiversity movement there, that is detrimental as well. It's not it goes way past labels, but that's indicative of this whole thing, the infighting and the lack of decision making, and the we need to have a term that everybody agrees on so that it is the same term used in the scientific literature, so that we have access to research that is being done. And therefore, we need to have these labels so people can put these labels on that for the science. And then it's like, okay, but if that label is not actually indicative of the person because it's context dependent,
Right.
is the science and the research accurate?
Right. Well, and like a lot of this stuff, it's like, okay, really, how many years have neurodivergent folks actually knowingly been a part of the science?
Right. That's just now happening.
Right. It's so new. Because I mean, obviously there were people who were neurodivergent and didn't know it in the science previously, but that's a whole different mindset than when you're like, oh, I do this because of this thing. And that's why these, and then that influences the science. And that's the big difference. Um, and I don't know. My brain has gone dead. Um,
It's heavy, right? It's heavy. It's a lot to think about.
right. And well, and like, okay. So we kind of talked about this when we were pre-gaming previously. Pre-gaming is the comorbidities and how that influences things.
That's a bad word. You can't say comorbidities because
Why
that
not
means
now?
inherently, comorbidities is a medical. It's a medicalization of
Can there
terms.
be a newsletter?
Um, so
Your
so
other sparkly bits.
the the appropriate term, and I hope everybody understands that I'm being sarcastic here, because I see and understand both sides, and I think that everybody needs to come to the table and be able to have this conversation, that we are having. So I can, and that's just me. I'm that way about absolutely everything. So let's come to the table. Let's talk about this: comorbidities and co-occurring conditions. Comorbidities is the medicalized term, and it's the medical model of disabilities, versus co-occurring conditions is the social model, or more of a social model. So
I'm sticking to
that's
sparkly
where this
bits.
whole thing comes in place, right? Are we looking at this as the medical model or the social model? And should we be able to do both at the same time?
So we're going to use the Mollyism of sparkly bits because now I've lost my goddamn train of thought. Okay. So umbrella conditions, as in, like, okay, I am autistic. You have all of these different things, and then you have all of these, and
Right.
sometimes you have two or
I am
three things. Like
autistic and ADHD
right.
and have CPTSD.
Yes.
We have multiple
Right.
things happening at the same time.
And so that influences each of the things. And sometimes you cannot tell which one goes to which, or both are at the same time, or what's happening. Um, and I think that was why it was so hard for people to necessarily diagnose me, is because they're like, well, let's roll the dice and see where we land. like,
Right. We're going to try this one
um,
today.
yeah, like, like looking back on it, it's like you should have known for these 300 reasons why this was wrong, but that's fine. Um, I know you were making a point, but you derailed me so much I can't regain it.
I'm sorry. I couldn't not go there, because
But
that's what we're
seriously, can they
talking about
like
today.
the Neurospicy newsletter? Because like I don't. Honestly, I don't know how any of us are supposed to fucking keep up unless we're constantly every morning checking what words we are supposed to use or not supposed to use, because I'm fine with changing my vocabulary if I could be informed, not in the middle of a conversation.
Right.
Like I want to make it clear, I'm not resistant to change. Like I mean, okay, I am, but like I'm not resistant to changing vocabulary because it's harming somebody in some way. Totally fine with it. But you can't cancel a word and not tell anybody.
Well, but that's the thing. That's the thing that's happening though is people, this is the whole reason why we came in and had this conversation today, because that is exactly what is happening. And you getting derailed in this conversation is exactly what is happening to things being done in the community and things getting done, getting us to the places where we want to be.
And I guess I'm also looking at it from, if we were to cancel every word that had an etymology of some crazy thing, we would have no fucking words. Like words came from things that were from the past. That's how language happens. And it grows and it changes. And it's not, I sometimes I just don't think people are thinking it through. Like, okay, we do this in this case, but now are we always going to do that in every case? So are we going to make up new words?
I think that people think it through based on their own experience of it, right? So people become very attached to things based on how it makes them personally feel, right? So here's this person on Lawrence Carter Long on on yep, the tweet place, Twitter, says says I use person first language, identity first language, and community first language in rotation interchangeably to honor the origins, intentions, and evolution of each option. It doesn't matter much where the words disabled or disability are placed as long as they are used, say the word. And that is very much how I roll.
Mhm.
And in fact, in the ND23 community server and our community agreement, it says be respectful of how a person chooses to identify and do not correct them on their own personal way to identify and the words that they use to talk about themselves.
Right. I think so I agree. And I do rotate out. You'll notice throughout the episode, I think I've said people with autism, autistic people, like 40 different iterations of that. Um, the one place I get super angry is I'm going to describe a specific type of person here. I was at, well, that's too specific. It bothers me. I'm going to air quote here, the autistic moms, the I'm an autistic
Okay.
mom. And then
The
they use
moms of
the
people,
mom
the moms
who
of autistic people, but the mom is not herself
not
or
autistic.
themselves autistic,
Correct.
but they are
They
called autistic moms.
right. Those
Yes.
specific people. Not like you and me.
Right.
Not you and me. Okay.
Clarifying. I'm
Yes,
clarifying
sorry.
that for
Yes,
everybody so
thank
they
you.
understand
Who's
that's what you're
listening?
talking about.
When they're like, "Oh, I have a child with autism." And they say it in that like weird creepy way where you're like, "I feel like you're talking bad shit about your kid and that they're broken." And that I'm like, "You mean you have an autistic child?" That I will correct because I I know for a fact when they say it that way that they don't see that as a neurotype, they see it as some type of disease, and that shit, I'm not going for that. We are gonna have a debate right here and now because this is not continuing. Like, if you as an adult are like, "Oh, yeah, I I'm a person with autism," and that's your choice, totally fine. But teaching your child that they're broken just because you don't understand, you, the autistic mom we were just talking about, don't understand the basics of your own child's brain, not okay with that. Not at all.
And that's a societal thing, right? Like that is what people have been told and taught, and that actually underlies this debate. It
Mhm.
underlies the debate of um, that just happened. Two articles just came out like yesterday. So one actually came out earlier this month, and then a response was written to it. Um, a response was written to it and posted on the 23rd. And unfortunately, that full article is completely behind a paywall. The full response is behind a paywall, and I just refuse to pay $15 to have access to something for 48 hours. And I just can't do that. But I do know that it was there. So there was an article. Actually, this article, sorry, was not at the first of the month. It was first published in December, and it says a full semantic toolbox is essential for autism research and practice to thrive. And they are saying in there that science needs us to have the terms disorder, um, impairments, and and that um, so it says some autism community members have urged a dramatic lexical shift concerning ASD, namely that the field should dispense with language that connotes impairment, pathology, or suffering. Um, Three recent articles suggest avoiding or replacing terms like disorder, deficit, risk, symptoms, challenging problem behavior, comorbid, and prevention to acknowledge ASD as a benign part of the human condition. And then they go on to say that this isn't, all of those things are not actually ableist language, that it's appropriate scientific terminology to have the discussion in order to support the autistic community. And then on the 23rd of April, this response to this, which was written by a lot of people in the autism community, um, came together and they wrote a response. Anti-ableist language is fully compatible with high quality autism research. So the basis of this is you actually can stop using all of those terms and still have good quality research that supports the autistic community. Here's my take on it.
I was gonna say, I have a take.
Both sides are making good points. Is this conversation stopping us from creating the environment and the new systems which we would like to have in place that actually in practice are supporting the ND community as a whole? And if so, how can we have this conversation and still move forward in a practical way to get shit done?
Yeah. I mean, I guess I have a different opinion, but that's fine. Well, I mean, you're right. I understand what you're saying, and I'm not negating what you're saying. Let me be clear. I agree with you. Um, I think that a lot of the social response to being autistic is influencing the people who are like, we don't want to say these words, we don't want to do this thing. But from a scientific standpoint, our brains are different. Disorder doesn't mean bad. It means disorder. It is outside the typicality.
Mm.
And if you want to change the word disorder to be atypical, I don't think that sounds any better. Whatever. I also have bipolar disorder. So I have a lot of disorders going on. And that doesn't make me feel less than. That just makes me understand that my brain is atypical of the freaking bell curve. So are we
Right.
going to remove disorder in the entire medical lexicon? Because what is it? 5% of the population on the planet. It's probably more now, but like, I understand we need to make a change in certain ways, but this word doesn't mean bad. It just means different than what we see as a curve. And eventually, I don't know, that could change.
Right.
But I think that we need to stop internalizing what we were taught before the medicine actually knew what was going on. And that is our responsibility to change and help the majority of the population understand and see what the reality is. They're not going to change it because they don't know, because they've never met somebody with ASD.
Right.
So if we
Well,
become
they
well,
probably
they
have
probably have.
actually. I can almost
Right.
guarantee that they have,
But I
but
guess
they possibly were not aware.
right. And I think that those of us that can stand out and make a statement, hi podcasting, that we can change things. But I think, like you said, we need to focus on things that are actually going to move us forward. And focusing on a word that doesn't even mean bad, like I part of me is like, okay, I want you to tell me right now why you think disorder is bad. What in your life has influenced you to believe that? Is it because people were always like, you have a disorder? Okay, then you've internalized a meaning to a word that isn't the real meaning of that word.
Right. The problem there is that so have the people in society, right? And it's because of that and the way they treat people. So, disability and special needs,
The same
right?
word.
Right. But um so this is an article from USA Today that talks about this. There was actually a study done, and they used the term special needs in order to soften, right? To soften, quote
Mm-hmm.
unquote, disability. But what happened is that people hear special needs and they actually don't get the supports that they need because they don't have the label disability. And the label disability comes from here's what it says: special needs doesn't offer the same legal protections.
Mm-hmm.
So now we're looking at that, and we're looking at the science, and we're going, um, is that same thing going to happen with these new words or the new language that we want to have put in place? Um, so here it says special needs. The term is not a legal one. In fact, it only appears about a dozen times across thousands of pages of laws in the US. Never once are children with disabilities or adults with disabilities referred to as children with special needs or adults with special needs. Rather, individuals with disabilities are always referred to in US law as individuals with disabilities. Um, this is where, when we are looking at the policy and the actual effect that it has on people and their access to resources, this is where we need to be focusing. And I think the people who are saying, all of the people who participated in writing the article about anti-ableist language are coming from a great space of, let's put and have the right language in place so that people get the supports that they need. Awesome. But let's be really specific about defining it, figuring out what it actually does mean without feelings being involved. And I know that's easy for me to say because I like to be in the space of, I'm going to look at the facts and not the feelings. Um, but that's kind of what we have to do, right? There were a lot of people who were like, special needs, special needs, special needs. There were enough that became the norm. That became what was put into place. Who put that into place? Were there disabled individuals who participated in putting that into place, or was it heavily parents and teachers who are
Mhm.
non-disabled, who are taking care of disabled individuals? I don't know. I would have to look into that and look into that further. Um, but we have gotten rid of the term handicapped and recognized that that is not um, meeting the needs of a community. That disabled is, I know the
Where
word
did they
hasn't,
get rid of that?
it's just used a lot less now than it
Oh,
used to
yeah,
be. It's
mhm, yeah.
not like thrown out,
Just
but it's
like, I'm
used.
pretty sure that's on all of our parking spot things.
Yes, yes. But it's not used as much, and
Mhm,
it's slowly like fading out and being replaced. And
mhm,
people are coming in and saying disabled and disabilities, and that's becoming more common to the language. So,
mhm.
um,
I
and that's
mean, there
good.
even in that, like, from where we grew up and what that word meant to what it means now is a huge jump.
Hmm.
Because even still, I feel weird saying it, but it's true about myself. Like, I'm a disabled veteran, and it's like, I can say that. It's okay.
I know.
You know?
You kind of cringe a little bit, but that's going right back to those feelings that you were talking about of, what have you been told and taught from our society
Mhm.
that makes you, as a disabled person, cringe to call yourself a disabled person? Is
Right, but I'm
that
also doing the thing I said, which is I have to work on that personally.
No, absolutely. And
Yeah.
but that goes into that whole societal thing and that feeling.
Mhm,
And when people write articles and they want to spend their time, effort, and energy having these conversations about language, it's for the same reasons, as you said
mhm,
earlier. What have they learned? What have they been taught that has led them to have this interest and to want this fight? Equally, the scientists who are saying, no, and it's not all scientists, by the way, but the scientists who wrote the article and said, but we need this language for science, what have they been taught? And what we need to do is say, okay, how can we do the most biased work to have the highest impact and positive outcomes for our community? And the answer to that is community engagement and community involvement.
mhm,
The more we do of that, the more we will be able to find language that we all can be okay with.
yeah. Alright, I just realized we've been at this for an hour. Sometimes we get carried away with our conversations. Not carried away, they're very good conversations, but our conversations lead us to manipulating time and space and traveling an hour later. Um,
Sometimes they do.
yes.
Absolutely, sometimes they do.
Um, so all in all, we know this is a conversation that is definitely heavy and comes with its own set of opinions, and we'd love to hear yours. So don't be afraid to ask questions or clarifying statements that you need us to clarifications that you need us to anyway, words. Um, but yeah, I think that's it for today.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is we're having a conversation and there's no judgment either way.
Mm-mm.
Um, everybody has their own opinion, and I guess for me, I there is judgment. There is judgment, not about the words and not about the conversation. The judgment comes from when the conversation gets in the way of progress.
Mm-hmm.
So I say, let's have the conversation as we are moving forward, not in place of moving forward.
Agreed.
And I think that I'm going to use that as a quote because I really like it. Sometimes I say things that I am happy about, and I know when I go back and I'm looking at the transcript, I'm a bit like, "Ooh, that's good."
Yeah.
So anyway, I like that. But thanks for listening to Drudgery Dreams and In Between, a weekly live podcast coming to you every Tuesday at 9 a.m. Central, 7 a.m. Pacific. If you're catching this live on YouTube, be sure to subscribe to our channel for updates when we're back here next week, the week after next, because we're not going to be here next week.
Yeah, we're not going to be here next week.
For all you podcast geeks, subscribe on your favorite podcast app or on them all. If you'd like to support the podcast, be sure to leave a rating and review and share with your friends to catch all the latest from us. Visit us at drudgeryanddreams.com and follow us on your favorite social media platforms at Drudgery and Dreams. Thanks again. See you next time.